It's time to talk music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast. So there's been a quite interesting update on Traktor, which is Native Instruments DJ software. Traktor's been something that I've been very interested in, but never really used because I use Serato. But there's a bit of a trend that you'll find with a lot of DJ software, even... remixing software, I suppose, because even MPC has had this update recently, and that is STEM technology.
I mean, it's not even just sort of like you say, beat making and DJing that in it at all. It's like it's in RX by Isotope as well. There's STEM separation technology, and what we're seeing now is with the merger of sort of Isotope, Native Instruments, Brainworks, and Plugin Alliance, I want to say. We are now seeing a lot of their software sort of cross-pollinating. So, like, the Traktor update has, like, Ozone's Maximizer in it, which I think is actually very, very clever. And Isotope's RX technology is what they're using to do stem separation, which I've got to say, like, the stem separation, to get it done really nicely in Isotope, like RX, is quite expensive. So I would be very surprised if people weren't just buying Traktor to get at the RX stem separation functionality.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you do that, I mean, I think they give Traktor 2 out for free. So I think anybody with a Native Instruments account, or a lot of people who have had Native Instruments accounts for a while, if you did claim Traktor 2 when it came out, you should be able to upgrade. So that means that potentially, my maths might not super work out here, but let me sound it out. You could get the RX stem separation feature in Traktor, and obviously you have to use, it would be a bit awkward to use in comparison to the plugin version, but cheaper by like what, maybe 10%, because the advanced range is like quite expensive for RX. And I should know because I just upgraded to the music production suite.
Yeah, and the update for Traktor is £64, and the buy it now is £129. So
yeah, so like even if you bought it fresh, that's still only the price of standard RX 11, and RX 11 doesn't have. Actually, that's a lot cheaper than RX 11 standard, but RX 11 standard doesn't have the stem separation feature. So it's one of those interesting things where I can see people using that to get at a feature that's sort of a lot more expensive.
Yeah, and also this isn't the first time Traktor's tried stems. They had their own pioneering stem format, didn't they? That this is sort of building on. The only problem with the old stems format is people had to burn out their tracks and make their own stems for Native Instruments. So it meant it had a very limited pool.
I also believe the pool was very, very niche. So it was like there was a lot of sort of independent sort of music because people was trying to get their beats out there, like for people who were utilizing stems. But they did have a little shop with some more mainstream or commercially sort of more desirable tracks. But ultimately, it sort of is like, it's like any rhythm game. If people don't if they can't get the licenses and they can't get people to support the format, ultimately it sort of gets overshadowed. But it very much looks like, and we were saying about this, wasn't we, that it looks like the Serato stem controllers that are made for this stem platform should be fully compatible with the stem separation versions.
Now, just to clarify, you did say Serato stem. Did you mean
I meant
the
Traktor.
Traktor
Sorry.
ones? Yeah.
Apologies.
The other thing, like, is we've seen a lot of people try to do this type of route of technology. Now, Harmonix's Fuser was this basically as a video game, and that had the same problem. It had a lot less sort of a lot less audio pool. So the pool of songs was only about 60 to 100 songs. And then obviously the game didn't perform as well as maybe anybody who made it wanted it to. So they sort of like quietly shut it down. So, and that's sort of what's happened with a lot of the stem features. Now, what we've seen a real trend of is this algorithmic stem separation via like Peter says, the RX technology that separates like things out in the frequency spectrum. Now, Serato's stem technology that they've got in theirs, it does get a bit crunchy when you start soloing things. So like sibilance from the vocals will bleed into the drums and vice versa. You will lose a lot of bass content out guitars. You'll lose a lot of top end out of bass. It's great in like a DJ set because you can just pull something out. If you pull one track out the four out, it's a lot easier to use. But if you want to solo, say, the vocals, you can get mixed results dependent on how the vocals recorded and what type of song it is. Now, songs with like a lot of cymbal content tend to ruin the vocals a lot more, but a lot of EDM songs don't have a lot of top end cymbals, so they're a little bit cleaner. But
it depends on ultimately like if that content is there though, because if you've got a lot of like in EDM, like I would completely agree in something like house, where it is more low end focused. But if you've got like EDM sections where you have all these like saws that are like full frequency range, then I think that works better than cymbals, but I still think it's ultimately about mixed density. So, I mean, I think about a song like The City by Madian, I don't feel like you would get a very good stem sound out of the vocal.
Yeah, because there's so much white noise and stuff, it crunches it out the vocal really when it's trying to separate.
It's the compression as well because I'm assuming when the machine learn train this stem separator, it must be on a massive range of content, but I imagine that they always get the best results off of more dynamic mixes, probably older mixes, because things are less compressed and less, glued together in that sense. So it must be a lot easier for like machine learning to identify what parts are which parts. Was I don't know how automation really plays into that role.
Yeah, the thing is with the technologies, it's very, very clever, and I think what makes it good technology that is handy in this environment is you don't have to have a separate pool of songs. The pool of songs that you can use is your pool of songs.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest killer that any of the stems formats, like from Fuser to the previous Native Instrument stem format, to even like buying or acquiring stems online, say from like remix competitions and stuff, you are very much strapped for which stems you can have and how high quality those stems are going to be. So what's really nice with this sort of algorithmic one is anything in your library, you can just go, look, let me hear what this algorithm pulls out the drum mix, or let's see how clean it does the vocals. And it's not tried and tested. It's never better than having the actual vocal stem if you know how to get it. But what I do think is for convenience, people will use it. And I've noticed on DJ pools like Extender Mix, since they've put out these sort of stem features on, say, the Akai or Serato in particular, because a lot of people use Serato, and Serato has its own DAW called Serato
Sample?
Serato Sample, yeah. You can actually get a lot more remixes, and I've noticed a lot more remixes, like bootleg remixes, appearing on DJ sites like Extender Mix, because the technology is there to pull the vocal out. So you don't have to do it with the EQ. You can just pull out the vocal and say, okay, well, this is good enough for me to make a remix with, because it's better than trying to dip two of the frequency bands and only leave the mids in. Because in a lot of rock songs, like all the content is mids, so it's very hard to just extract the vocal via EQ.
And then there's the other old-fashioned method. There's two actually that come to mind. There's the one where you have to have an instrumental, and then you do a phase alignment and a phase flip, so it phases all the music out and leaves the vocals. I've tried that, and it's surprising how well that works, but obviously, like anything, it isn't perfect. And the more compressed the master is, the more artifacts you get from where that vocal has displaced, like the amount of compression on the track.
Yeah.
And then also the karaoke machine method of just scooping out the mid.
Yeah.
Like the center of the track, or at least the center in a certain frequency. I'm not sure exactly how it works with the karaoke machine, but it is like a extract the mono situation. And I suppose it's like anything, isn't it? It's like, it depends how songs are mixed. So it's like with a Beatles track, you might unplug one, if you have the original sort of funky left-right mixes, the stereo mixes, you may unplug a speaker and you may find you've only got drums and vocals, and then the other one might have the guitar and bass in. So the thing when you're trying to find these stems is you've got to understand almost the way the song's mixed, because a technique that works on one song to acquire stems like the old-fashioned way won't work on another. So that's another interesting thing, because I imagine the way it's done with machine learning is it sort of identifies a voice type or instrument type, and it says that's a vocal. It doesn't matter where it is and how it sounds. I've identified that as the vocal. I'm going to try and split it. And I think it's like, you see like the spectrum readouts on RX and in like Spectral Layers by Steinberg, and I understand how it works, but it's like, in theory, but in reality, like, well, how do you just like take that section and there's bleed all over the place? And, it's not, music isn't made in clean sections, is it? Like frequency bands. So.
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe use this technology if there was one vocal type and then everybody used an acoustic drum kit, but because you have songs that use different types of kits, different types of instruments, different instrumentation, like how does it know how to extract a conga versus how to extract a Prada snare? Do you know what I mean? It's one of those things where, it's very, I mean, some of it's like on like drums are very like attack decay heavy and don't have much sustain, or for the most part they don't have a lot of melodic content, so it'd be quite easy to do that via some kind of machine learned algorithm to duck out, because you can almost do this if you ever have a transient shaper plugin. You can almost remove the drums entirely using one of them. It may not sound very clean, but if you put the attack on the least and then the decay on the most, it sort of sucks the drums out the mix, because it's basically pulling the attack out of the drums, and all drums is attack, So it's this type of thinking, but it's very clever technology, and like I think it's very cool from like an educational standpoint for people to get their favorite songs and to say, oh well, let me just mute the drums and see what the song sounds like. Let me mute the vocals, let me hear what the instrumental sounds like. I always think muting vocals and listening to what the band is doing or listening to what the track is doing by itself is a very interesting thing, because you realise that some songs rely entirely on the vocal to carry the song, like the actual structure of the song. And then other songs, the vocal is there, but it's more about the music, but it's very dependent on the way the song's composed.
Yeah, and also in Traktor, there's this remix on the fly mode, which is like a built-in sort of remix template set that sort of gels with the stem thing. And I'm very curious to see if that is embraced by the remixing community. I mean, it's certainly like, for example, right, say you DJ.
Yeah.
And you don't really do like production in a DAW, but you do a lot of DJing and sort of mashing up of tracks. The remix on the fly feature is a great way to sort of try and use Traktor as your DAW and say, look, well, I'm going to build an arrangement in Traktor and sort of just why learn something else when I can stick with what I'm good at? And I imagine that there will be people that really, really suits. But I just think it's always really interesting seeing how the software sort of updates and how these programs just keep getting more and more and more, unique in a certain way. And then, because stem separation is now in everything practically.
Yeah, because what happens is one piece of software puts out the technology, and then every single other software goes, well, if we don't have this, nobody will buy our next update because people will expect us to have it.
Yeah.
It's like anything, if you add a feature to one of the competition, all of the rest of the competition have to figure out how to have something that does that function or just copy that function in order to stay competitive. Because, like they can update Traktor, but without the stem thing, it's just the same basically as it was.
Yeah. And it's so, you think if everything does the same stuff, then what's the point in using it? But I suppose a lot of the time, if you are well into Serato's ecosystem, you probably won't switch to Traktor. I mean, I think the main reason that draws us to Traktor is since we are very ingrained, we've got Complete and a bunch of isotope stuff. You know, we do have a lot of the software that goes with Traktor. It's sort of it's always like like that's sort of part of everything else we have. We've got a toe really in Traktor's ecosystem, even though we don't use it. But coming from Serato, I mean, it's difficult to imagine, swapping unless you had a really good reason. Like, you had a brand new set of controllers that you really wanted to get into, and you was like, well, I have to now switch.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that, because I was very tempted to get Traktor over Serato, the only thing that for me made me want to get Serato was it has the video function, which Traktor does not, and I wanted to use music videos, so that's what put me on Serato. Otherwise, if it was just audio, I probably would have gone for Traktor, because Traktor visually is very interesting, but the other thing with Serato is it is the most commonly used, so
it sort of draws a lot of parallels with like streaming platforms. I mean, we was talking to just some friends about being on platforms like Spotify for like such an elongated amount of time for a specific functionality. Either it's the one that you like for playlist building, or say with YouTube, definitely one of the advantages is the way that it has its video engine, and all of YouTube sort of built in. But that's something that also happened with Spotify. Like, they implemented a video engine, but it's like, why implement a video engine for Spotify when, I mean, YouTube is a video platform first.
And also, Spotify's video engine was nowhere near as seamless as YouTube's was. Seeing from Spotify's sort of the way it works to how YouTube works. YouTube, you hit the video tab, it goes exactly to what second of the song you're on and continues to play the video. Spotify, every time you hit the video or song tab, it restarts the song, which is a mood killer when you're doing playlisting, but also then it doesn't know what to do after you've got no videos lined up. It just was very like clunky to use. And the other thing is that the selection, like when I was talking about the pool of songs, Spotify had a very small pool of videos. Like, most of even the biggest artists with like 20 million, it was only like 1 in 10 videos was there.
It does make you wonder what pool they sort of got access to, whether it was just like the big threes pools, but then
I think the artists will just upload, but they just will do, it'll be pretty primitive sort of feature rollout at the moment.
It seemed to be just like the biggest hits. It didn't seem to be like, there wasn't like an artist. If I thought of Nickelback, it was like, yeah, how You Remind Me had a video, I believe, but like then a load of their other videos aren't on there, and it's like one of those things where you think, well, why does some of the songs have videos and the rest don't, when they all have music videos that are available?
Yeah, and I think that's why Spotify, because they was just trying to put too many features in Spotify that I think a lot of people don't appreciate or use. With bad company practices, that was mainly why we decided to go to YouTube Music. And the other thing with YouTube Music is you get YouTube Premium, which is quite handy if you watch a lot of YouTube anyway, and you get fed up of adverts. So it's a far better value for money situation than Spotify is. And the other thing with Spotify is they're just like the courses, some of the podcast stuff, with the video function and stuff. It just, there's a lot going on with Spotify. They're trying to do too much, and that's what some of the DJ software does really well, is they just stick to, this is the DJ software, and then we can have vinyl or video or stem integration, but it's not getting in the way of anything.
It's almost like booting up Serato and then having a video course in Serato that is like, well, you want to learn how to do vinyl, do this video course, but it's all built into Serato. You're like, well, I can go to Serato's website if I want to watch a video course, or I could go to YouTube. So, yeah, it was a tough decision swapping from Spotify, because we've been on Spotify for like 15 years. And now we're on YouTube. It's a bit like what we've been saying about these softwares. It's all of a sudden certain things that you really used to doing on Spotify, it's slightly different on YouTube. And Spotify does have an edge when it comes to the actual playlist building and the sort of like the queuing functionality. YouTube's is good, but it's different. And that's the thing. Like, sometimes it's not about one being better than the other. It's about being used to one and then having to operate on the other. I think that's why going from Serato to Traktor would be quite tough, because although the wheels are the same and the controllers are the same, in that sense, there's always going to be bits like maybe the way a song loads in, or maybe the way you have to do some sort of...
It's where all the buttons are. So when it comes to looping, the button will be in a different place. When it comes to, say, doing some chopped up stuff, the way it chops stuff up, the way it utilizes the beat grid, everything will be just slightly different. And the other thing with Spotify is that they kept changing their UI and the full way the site looked or the app looked. So if Cubase updated and it went, oh, well, we know you liked the way it looked and we know you had it memorized, but we've changed it all. And it's all in different places. And it doesn't operate the same as it used to. They would lose a lot of people. And that is the problem with Spotify ultimately, is that it is not the same platform as it was even like 5 years ago. They're adding too much stuff. They're moving too many things around, and then you can't find anything, and your muscle memory is shot anyway. So if your muscle memory is shot on a piece of software or an app, you have nothing to lose by switching.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You're talking about mainly the home screen, like the sort of suggested...
Yeah.
All the Spotify built in.
The way it operates, and then, like I said, they keep adding features and taking them away, which doesn't help as well. So... You know, it's little things like that. Now, if you went to Cubase and they went, right, we've took the backclick function out of adding tracks, you'd be constantly going, all right, let me backclick to add a track, and then go, oh, it's gone. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah, you see, I found the way that Reason 13 updated their stuff to be very interesting, because they haven't removed any features. They always build on top. And even when they hide features, they showed how the block functionality was still there, because people thought that they'd gotten rid of it, but they said no, it's just in a drop down box now. So once you activate it stays there. But because a lot of the newer Reason users don't use the block functionality, because it was more for reasons like earlier versions, they've allowed a toggle now to hide it, so it's not getting in the way for people who don't use it. But if you want it, it's always there. And that's the thing with all of Reason's devices. They really, realistically, anything you boot up, if you're just using Reason's core devices, it should work in any version of Reason that obviously has the devices that you were using. Because, you know, you can't go back to Reason 1 with like a polytone patch, because Reason 1 doesn't have polytone. But you could open up a session you'd made in Reason 3 in Reason 13, and in theory it should play straight away.
Yeah, and the full idea for me with like software is it needs to build on what was there. It doesn't want to be changing things. Now, if there is very clunky features, it needs to address that in a manner where it doesn't feel different, but it feels modernized. And I know that this is like a very tough thing for developers to do a lot of the time, because it's like, how do you keep the essence of what the program was whilst also trying to change the workflow? And that is the number one thing that almost every piece of software is trying to change. Its workflow, because a lot of things are clunky. And if you think about when we had, say, like the older operating systems for Windows and Mac, a lot of stuff was clunkier to do, and now there's a lot more drag and drop sort of technology implemented, because people are used to phones now. People want like drag and drop sort of technology in every piece of software they use, so they have to try and implement that in a way where it feels natural but it doesn't overshadow what was there. And that's what I think is the really tough part about trying to have a continuously running and updating piece of software, instead of just saying, right, let's just scrap it and build something completely new. A lot of these technologies, they've got big IPs and big customer bases that expect an iteration, or if they're not expecting an iteration, they have to be sold on an iteration. And a lot of the companies, like any sort of sequential product, they will lose fans and people every time they do an update. Some people will go, I'm just not into it, I'm going to stick on what I've got. And this is why a lot of people don't want subscriptions. They want perpetual licenses, because if they don't want to update, they don't have to. Whereas with a subscription, you sort of have to.
I imagine it is very tough to freeze a subscription, like in your software version.
Impossible.
Yeah, I never really thought about that, because say like if you're on Reason Plus or Pro Tools' subscription, it just sort of bakes all the updates in for you,
And it's
really,
online
to a certain
activated.
extent.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I want to stay on, say, maybe you're a Reason Plus subscriber and you're like, I don't want to go to Reason 13. I suppose you could by not installing 13, but like, yeah, it gets annoying because the way that they implement a lot of the updates in a lot of the software, but particularly, Reason, it always prompts you at the top. So I think you can hide it if you don't want to update. But, a lot of the updates in almost everything now, I mean, if they don't do it automatically, and I'm also thinking about a lot of like the plugin installers and launchers now that you get like Native Access and Isotope, whatever it's called, and the UAD one. They all like immediately, if you open up, it's like, I need to be updated.
And the other thing is, you feel like as a consumer, you don't really have much of a choice. Now, this is part of the reason people do like physical for a lot of stuff. And now I know that physical, like computer programs are very like questionable because basically you install the oldest version on the disk and then it just updates. But like, I was just thinking, because we're listening to U2 remastered, we're listening to A Beautiful Day remastered, right? Now, if you think about All You Can't Leave Behind as an album, right? It's like you putting that CD, your original CD that come out 24 years ago, in your CD player with internet connection, it going, there's a new version of this available, and rewriting your CD. As soon as you put it in the disc tray, right? Now your old CD that you bought 24 years ago that you like and you like the way it sounds is gone.
Yeah.
There's no way to get it back. And that's what a lot of subscriptions and sort of like sequential running internet connected pieces of equipment.
I think
like.
of games as well. A lot of games are like that now.
You don't really have much of a choice. I mean, it's like putting your DVD in and it coming out as like a 4K Blu-ray. Yes, that technology sounds ideal until we're talking about like preservation and choice.
Let's go back to something like Star Wars, where people like to have a certain version of the original trilogy. Now, that sounds great. Oh yeah, theoretically, I put my disc in and get a higher quality version back out. What about if your high quality version have added some CG like aliens and everything to the background and CG Yoda, and you go, well, hang on a second, I didn't want the changes to be made. I just wanted the higher quality. It's like, well, you can't have one without the other.
It's like censorship, you could put something in it could censor a deleted scene out, or it could censor something that wasn't received well out.
Yes.
In an update. And this is the thing. Every update, you lose things. There's things that just get, the things that disappear that you maybe not thinking about with a lot of technology. And I just think it's very difficult with the way consumerism is, particularly with, say, like I don't know how anybody can stay on Adobe, because Adobe sounds like a right nightmare to people who don't use it. But you don't really have much of a choice. Like for us, if Reason or Cubase has an update, it's either do I freeze my setup forever or do I just update now because I'm going to update?
Yeah.
You don't really have a say.
It's a lot harder for Mac users because I know the Mac updates are a little bit more of a nightmare. I think when you're on PC, it sort of just flows until it's not supported to a certain level. But I think, is it something to do with Mac doesn't give out like the developer tools till after the fact?
Yeah, so I think they're not very kind.
Playing catch up, because on social media you always see, like, especially companies like Native Instruments and all the DAW companies, they're always like, we've finally updated to whatever, and I'm going to be way off, so I'm not even going to say one of the Mac updates because I can never remember what the newest one is.
It's like as well, when we're talking about companies, it's like you're Pioneer at DJ software, and well, they've got Record Box, but let's think about the hardware, because the hardware is where Pioneer really live, right? So you've got your Pioneer wall posters, you've got your Pioneer desk slip mats, everything's decked out with your Pioneer brand. The guy, well, the company that owns Pioneer says, do you know what? We're rebranding to Alpha Theta, right? And you look at all your Pioneer stuff, all your T-shirts, your full rooms decked out because you're a big fan of Pioneer, right? And you go, but it's Pioneer, it's not Alpha Theta. Do you know what I mean? It's an awful word to say. God knows why they rebranded it to that. That is the problem. I
feel like the only reason why they've rebranded is Pioneer is quite a
generic, or
it can be a name where I imagine there is a lot of competing brands using the name Pioneer.
But they was the biggest brand, effectively.
100% the way, but they might not have liked the fact that there was other this is all speculation. We don't really know. I'd have to read the stuff. But it may have been that they wanted a brand that was easier to trademark, less common, and more, you know what I mean?
But yeah, like as a fan, you don't really have a choice. Do you know what I mean? And this is the thing that any company, a bit like Propellerhead, really, just rebranded to Reason Studios, or like Reason 12 or so. So you don't really have a choice. Do you know what I mean? As a consumer, if your favorite program goes, we're rebranding and we're changing all of it, and it's all going to change, you either have to freeze your setup or update and buy into it. And I think that's what's really hard with like this sequential software sort of update technology and stuff, that a lot of people find themselves trapped in these ecosystems, and that's where their skill set is. It's like people who are on Ableton, just like Ableton, because it
I was also going to say Ableton is also a software where I feel like there's a lot of people who are still on Live 9.
Yeah,
like Ableton Live 9, and a lot of people are like, that's fine, and I'm not looking for anything more than Ableton Live 9.
Yeah.
And so are you somebody who's stuck on Ableton 2? No, not 2. Are you somebody who's stuck on Ableton Live 9? Or are you like one of the people who I see every day who's like, Reason 8's good enough for me? Or are you trailblazing it on Reason 13 and Ableton 12? And are you doing all the point updates because you want to see what's going on? Let us know in the comments and forums and whatever we have down here.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody.